Hello there, today I am here to bring you a review of the best British short stories of 2016, edited by Nicholas Royal. This is the third book I have read for my independent published series and is published by Salt, whom I will link down below. Now, I'm going to say straight off, this is a short story anthology, and I don't necessarily think, having read a few of them now, I don't necessarily think they're the best in terms of enjoyment for me. They have other benefits, which I will go into later, but basically this is a collection of stories that Nicholas Royal has collected from all over the place. So there's all different stories from literary magazines and collections, and he's basically put together the ones he thinks are the best of 2016. Now, I will say first off that there were only about 2 stories in here that I skipped because I found them quite uninspiring to start with. All the others were either average or really quite good, but still it left me a bit underwhelmed. I did first give this 3 stars, I then upped it to 4 stars because the individual stories themselves were 4 stars, but I think the overall reading experience was 3 stars, which is why I think I don't get along with anthologies. I think a lot of the problem is that, especially as I was reading it sort of one story after another, it's quite hard in that short space of time to actually get into a style, whereas when you're reading a complete short story collection you very much get a accurate representation of that author's style throughout the stories, whereas obviously with this you only have a short snippet to get to grips with each author and then the tone shifts entirely. I also think the problem for me with anthologies is that obviously these have been collected for Nicholas Royal's personal tastes, and not everyone's going to have those same personal tastes. So there were a few different reasons why I find this problematic, but in the end I did give it 4 stars because there were some really good stories in here. There's one story in here called The Woman Who Lived in a Restaurant, and this woman literally lives in a restaurant, and it's from the perspective of a new member of staff wondering why this woman lives in the restaurant, and he walks in on her doing something that makes him quite uncomfortable, and it sort of looks at why she's there, and it's kind of a bit magical realism-y, and I really enjoyed that one. There's also a story about some schoolboys who revisit their old school after the war, and that's really touching, and it was a really lovely story. And there was also a story in here about an elderly woman who knows she is dying, and she gets lost in a cyber world, and it sort of looks at how that helps her escape, and I quite enjoyed that one. So there were a lot of stories that I could note in here. Some have been quite forgettable, but I think that's kind of standard with a short story collection, especially in anthology. You're always going to have standout stories and forget about some of them. There are more male authors in here. I think there's only about 3 or 4 women, and I mean, I think that's understandable. Nicholas Royal is a male, and I think we automatically gravitate towards our own sex. For example, if I put together a short story anthology for whatever reason, I think it would be pretty much 99.9% female authors. So it makes sense that a male author would pick out short stories written by men, and I would also say that a lot of the short stories written by men are actually written from a very understanding female perspective, not in the way that it's sort of patronising or that they get it wrong, but that you genuinely, unless you knew it was written by a man, you wouldn't have realised that, like, it was completely well done. But for me, I just think I automatically gravitate towards female authors, and also there was only about 2 or 3 magical realism-y short stories in here, and I definitely find, strangely enough, that I prefer magical realism in short stories, even though I kind of avoid it a bit more in novels, which is quite interesting. But I just find that magical realism short stories have a sort of jazz and they pull you in straight away, whereas realist short stories kind of don't do that as much. But then I would like to start reading more realist short stories, and I think this has given me some ideas, and I did, as I say, enjoy a lot of them. I also think anthologies are important in the terms of learning about the craft a lot more. Like, in a short story collection you get one person's perspective on a short story, whereas in an anthology you get so many different takes on a short story and so many different styles, and it really is an interesting experience in terms of taking away from it, and in terms of, especially for writers, I think it's important to read anthologies and get that experience, and maybe even experience authors that you never would have before, or that you find problematic and why you find them problematic. So I think there's a lot of reasons why it's worth reading, and there are also a lot of reasons why I didn't particularly love it, but it was still a really good read, and there were still some really lovely stories in here, so I would definitely recommend this for the short story lovers out there, and I will see you next time. Bye!